violence are before me. Strife and contention arise, so the law becomes slack, and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous, therefore judgment comes forth over me. I will stand at my watchpost and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will say to me, and what he will answer concerning my complaint. Then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so that a runner may read it. For there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Look at the proud. Their spirit is not right in them, but the righteous live by their faith. Hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people.
Thanks be to God.
The second reading is from Seventeenth. Paul, an apostle of Christ Jesus, by the will of God, for the sake of the promise of life that is in Christ Jesus. To Timothy, my beloved child, grace, mercy, and peace from God the Father and Christ Jesus our Lord. I am grateful to God, whom I worship with a clear conscience as my ancestors did. When I remember you constantly in my prayers night and day, recalling your tears, I long to see you so that I may be filled with joy. I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that lived first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I'm sure lives in you. For this reason, I remind you to rekindle the gift of God that is within you through the laying on of my hands. For God did not give us the spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power, of love, and of self-discipline. Do not be ashamed, then, of the testimony about our Lord, or of me, his prisoner, but join with me in suffering for the gospel, relying on the power of God who saved us and called us with holy calling, not according to our works, but according to his own purpose and grace. This grace was given to us in Christ Jesus before the ages began, but it has now been revealed through the appearing of our Savior Christ Jesus, who abolished death and brought life and immortality to light through the gospel. For this gospel I was appointed a herald and an apostle and a teacher, and for this reason I suffer as I do. But I'm not ashamed, for I know the one in whom I have put my trust, and I am sure that he is able to guard until that day what I have entrusted to him. Hold to the standard of sound teaching that you have heard from me, in the faith and love that are in Christ Jesus. Guard the good treasure entrusted to you with the help of the Holy Spirit living in us. Hear what the Spirit is saying to God's people.
Thanks be to God.
Increase our faith. The Lord replied, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted in the sea, and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your slave who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, come here at once and take your place at the table? Would you not rather say to him, prepare supper for me, and put on your apron and serve me while I eat and drink? Later, you may eat and drink. Do you thank the slave for doing what was commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, we are worthless slaves. We have only done what we ought to have done. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
How many of you at some point have done something for someone and had the person that you did the thing for become just effusive in their praise? Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. You're my hero, you're my angel. I couldn't have gotten through this without you. Something along those lines. Ever had that happen where you stop to help somebody with something and they're just over the top with their gratitude for what you've done? Now, typically when something like that happens, maybe we saw somebody on the side of the road and we stopped to help, made a phone call on their behalf, who knows? Could have been anything. But we would say to ourselves and say to them, oh, really, it was nothing. I only did what, a normal person would do. Anyone would have done the same thing in my place. We kind of tend to poo-poo it and have some humility about it because really, all we've done is the next right thing to do. We see somebody that needs help and we just step in and help. And so having that kind of attitude of, really, it's okay. I just did what was the next right thing to do. I did what everybody else would have done in my position, is kind of the right attitude to have. Instead of looking for reward, looking for praise, looking for accolades about how wonderful we are, because that's not typically the way Christ would have us do things, right? Christ himself, who was God, emptied himself and became a servant and was here on the earth and says, I came to serve others. And that if you're going to follow me, then that's what you do. You serve others. And so the commands that he gives us are to love God and to love our neighbors and ourselves, right? So those are his basic commands, and he says everything else flows from that. If you love God and if you love your neighbor, then you're going to do the next right thing. In our gospel lesson today, the part that you didn't get, that came before where the lesson started, the lesson started today with the disciples saying, Lord, increase our faith. Well, what came before that you didn't get this morning was Jesus is talking to them about how they should conduct themselves as his followers. And he gets to a point where he says, if someone sins against you and they apologize and make amends, then you should forgive them. And then there comes the part that says, and if they sin against you 70 times and they apologize and make amends, then you need to forgive them 70 times. And that's when we get to this part, because I have all ideas that the disciples are like, really? Somebody does me wrong 70 times? I'm supposed to continue to forgive them? I'm sure that they're all saying, I don't think I can do that. It gets to a point when you just go, you don't really mean this because you have done this 70 times to me. I'm not going to forgive you. And Jesus says, no, you need to forgive them each and every time. And they say, Lord, increase our faith so that we can do this. We can't do this if somebody does this to us that many times. And of course, it's an exaggeration that Jesus is using, but basically he's saying if someone is repeatedly sinning against you or doing you wrong, then you still, if they apologize, have to forgive them. And when they say increase our faith, Jesus' reply is, you don't need that much faith. If you had the faith of the size of a mustard seed, little tiny thing, that's all you need to be able to forgive someone. It's really not that hard. If you had that much faith, you could tell the tree to get up and be rooted in the sea, and it would. Then we get to a little bit of a story that he interposes right after he talks about this, when he talks about the slave coming in and doing the work that he's supposed to do and not looking for any reward or anything greater. Says, if you have been asked to do these things and this is what you are supposed to do and you do them, then that is its own reward. You're doing what you're supposed to do, so you don't get anything extra and above and beyond that. Now, I have to tell you, when I first read this and they were talking about the slave serving his Lord and doing only what he ought to have done, and the kind of humility that it requires, how many here are Downton Abbey fans? Let me see a hand, show of hands, okay. All right, some people have seen the show or the movie, either one, all right, and some have not. So I'll give you a little bit of a description about a character that appears both in the series and in the movie. And in the latest movie, there's a very funny scene that he's in. There's a fellow by the name of Mr. Mosley. And Mr. Mosley was on staff at Downton Abbey during the series, and then as times go on and they don't have the money to keep as many people on staff, they have to let Mr. Mosley go, and he becomes a teacher in the village. When we get to the movie, he's still the teacher in the village, but he remembers having served at Downton as a footman. Basically someone who brings in the food and drinks when they have parties or dinners or other meals, and waits on others, holding doors open, things like that. And so he served with distinction, and he really enjoyed serving at Downton Abbey when word comes that the king and queen are going to come to Downton Abbey. Mr. Mosley runs up to Downton Abbey, goes into the kitchen, and begs to be allowed to serve again because he wants to serve his king and queen. He is just so full of pride that they should come to Downton, and he's so desirous. He's over the top. He's just elated. The king and queen are coming. I've got to serve them. Please, please let me. And they do. They staff up a little bit for this visit. And during the course of the visit, the household staff and kitchen find a way to be the ones that do in fact serve the king and queen instead of the king and queen's own staff. I won't go into the details to spoil it for those who haven't seen the movie yet. But there comes a point where he is just, like I said, he is just so proud that he gets to serve his king and queen. And he comes in and he's serving, and they have been taught how to, put individual portions on each person's plate, and he's going around the room. And a comment is made about, oh, this isn't what I thought we would be having for dinner, and he just can't contain himself. And he says, I'll have you know that you are being served a meal by the cooks of Downton Abbey, and all the staff that have been serving you this evening are the staff of Downton Abbey. And then he realizes that he's just said that out loud when he's supposed to be kind of invisible. Servants are supposed to just kind of be invisible to the rest of the aristocracy that are there. And everybody turns and stares at him, and he suddenly realizes, yikes. And he kind of starts to melt a little bit and realizes that he shouldn't have said that he was looking for that accolade. He was looking for that recompense on, you should know that this is who's been serving you. And when it comes to his attention that he said that out loud and it really wasn't his place, he just sort of kind of curtsies his way out of the room and goes off kind of with his head down, realizing that he was being a little too prideful in what he was called to do, which is to serve his king and queen. But the thing about it is, his elation, his just excitement to be able to serve his king and queen is almost palpable. You can just see it in him. Every fiber of his being is just eager to do this. And I have to ask, how many of us wake up every morning and think, today's another day I get to serve my God and my Lord and the people? And how many of us do that? Is that the first thing that comes to your mind when you wake up in the morning? Not really, right? But think if we had that attitude of Mr. Mosley, if we woke up every morning saying, today is another day that I've been given to serve God, to serve God's people, how would that change our attitude throughout the rest of the day? How would we then think about what we've been given to do on this earth? To have that attitude of excitement and gratitude and elation for what we have been given and what we can do with it in our lives. That's not to say that we're looking for a reward or any special treatment or anything, but that this is what Jesus has commanded us to do. And that as the servants of God, that's what we ought to do, but we can do it with two different types of attitudes. One that's sort of begrudging, and one that is more gratitude. So I ask you, tomorrow morning, when you wake up, try and let that be the first thought that comes to your mind as you open your eyes. I get to serve God and God's people today. Amen. Amen.